But that's it. That's team sports. You gotta love team sports.
That is team sports,
and everybody needs a coach. Some people get to start. Some people are benched. Some are on the sidelines. That's just how it goes. Welcome back, everybody. We're back.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
It's been a hectic couple of weeks. It's been a hectic week.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a mad one.
There's a lot going on in the football world at the moment. We're not going to talk about some of it for obvious reasons, but if anybody has seen the internet over the last few days, they know the things that have been going down. The good, the bad, the sad. It's been an intense one. So I think before we get into what we want to talk about, I think the obvious place to start is the very tragic news from the week gone past. Gary, being the Liverpool fan in the group, you obviously wrote a beautiful article the other day about Diogo Jota. So being the resident Liverpool fan, we'll let you lead the charge.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I said it in the air. This one hurt. This one really, really hurt. And like you wake up on a Thursday morning, you think everything is cool, and then you see this shit coming across your news feed and coming across your WhatsApp groups and whatnot. And to see somebody, and look, you stop and think about it as a football fan and as a Liverpool fan. I stopped and thought about it first of all, and then you actually kind of think deeper into it. This lad was 28. He was in the prime of his career. He had 3 young kids. He just married the girl he'd been with since he was in, the equivalent of secondary school 10 days previous to this. He just won 2 major trophies and he had everything going for him. And for this to happen is completely tragic. And football takes a secondary, sport in general takes a secondary role when this sort of shit happens.
Yeah,
and you kind of realize where sport, and in this case football, sits in the grander scheme of things. And that's your initial thought, and then you sit back and you kind of see all of the tributes pouring in from across the football world. You see clubs like Everton, like Manchester United, like Leeds, die-hard rivals of Liverpool coming out in support of the club, in support of their players, in support of their fans, of everything goes on. And then you realise that actually football and sport maybe doesn't take a secondary role. Maybe it's something bigger.
I think
maybe it lets you see what football is in its most beautiful sense, that it's something that unites everybody of every race, every creed, every nationality, every club. I know it shouldn't take a tragedy like this to do it, but if anything good is going to come out of this, that's what you see from it. Jota as a player, there's only one word that I would use to describe him, and that's clutch. He was absolutely clutch for Liverpool. Last season, he pulled it out of the bag in the Merseyside derby, poignantly his last goal for the club.
Yes.
He has dragged Liverpool through semi-finals, through league games. All that. Any Tottenham supporter on here will remember what happened during that 4-3 game, and he will always be remembered for giving the proverbial 2 fingers to Richarlison, which I will love him forever for.
Yep. Anybody who fucks off Richarlison is a G in my book.
Absolutely. So, as a player, he was a legend. As a man, he was a legend. He was a huge family man. He was a great advocate for women's football. He was a great advocate for men's mental health. He was extremely outspoken on both topics. For him to lose his life and his career to end the way it has ended, it's tragic. But if something comes out of it, I think it's how you can see how football can unite the wider community.
Yeah, I think that's something that's it's actually something that you'd say is very emotional to see over the last number of days. Like players of different clubs, fans, like we've seen tributes in like Belfast at the Liverpool store for fans who couldn't travel to both Porto for a funeral or over to Liverpool to pay their respects. You see the murals outside Anfield, outside the Molineux. You've seen them in like Penarol where Andre Silva, his brother, played. It's horrible that it takes a tragedy of that kind of extent and magnitude. And this is something down the years in football. Like you had Manchester after the Manchester bombings, and they played the Europa League final like 2 days after, and you even had City like rolling out the mat to support them out doing this. You've had down the years, you've had like Hillsborough, you've had fucking horrible tragedies down the years, and like to see the way football does come together in times of darkness it's fucking like it's an example that should be set to the rest of society at times, that it's not about your rivalries, it's not about your side, it's about what's happening in the moment.
Yeah, and I think if, like, not to get spiritual, but if someone like Diogo Jota and Andre Silva could see that sort of outpouring at the moment, I'm sure that they would be great advocates for it. Given certainly how what sort of man Jota was.
Yep.
It is. Look, it's sad to think that it takes this sort of tragedy to see that coming together, but ultimately, I think that's probably a mirror of society in general. But I think, look, if anything good is going to come out of it, it is that piece. But ultimately, while we have lost an absolute legend of a player, what needs to be remembered is a wife has lost her husband, 3 kids have lost their father, and two people have lost both sons in a tragic accident. Yeah.
Cool. Let's.
But he'll be fondly remembered in the halls of Statter anyway, because he was always one that I think a few of us. Actually, I think at one point we had a fight over at one point to try and see him.
I ended up with him on my team this season and did valiant effort to win me a double.
He did. I think at one point there may have been some arguments about who got him in a transfer window in the previous iterations as well.
Wouldn't be like us, okay?
Not
that's classic Slug. That's some vintage Slug right there.
Absolutely.
I guess the order of the day is rest in peace, Andre Silva and Diogo Jota, and anybody affected by the tragedy. Major condolences. Right. So I suppose
also with everyone involved. Absolutely.
So let's drive on with the show. Before I do, actually, I do have a lovely Statter announcement. You can actually find Gary's piece on Jota on StatrDraft.com. But also, we have some lovely news in the last week. So we're obviously getting really fucking close to the new Premier League season. The app is getting agonizingly closer. Hello, Dean, joining us in. So you've actually picked a wonderful time to join the team, because I'm talking about the lovely update that I have on Statter for everybody this week, which is the app is obviously getting painfully close. We're about a month out from the Premier League. If you're not on the waiting list, you have very little time to do it now. At this point, we're in that kind of area where it is time to join the waiting list. We've actually announced our title sponsor for the season, which is lovely little drum roll, self drum roll here, and it is Movember. Movember, obviously one of the biggest charity groups in the world for men's mental health, men's health awareness, things like cancer, research around mental health awareness, and obviously we're just off the back of Men's Mental Health Month. And come November, I think we're going to be seeing 3 lovely gentlemen here with full luscious beards who will be trimming down to nothing but a mauve for the month of. Yeah, Jim, sorry, you have no choice. We're going to make that shout out.
Don't make the people see my chin, John.
We're going to make
Nobody
the call
wants to see that.
October.
Jimmy, they get to see both of mine, so it's fine.
We don't talk about it. I look like a 14-year-old, but no, basically the general gist is Movember are going to be one of our title sponsors this year. We're fucking delighted to have them on board. I have 1 or 2 others in the tank that we're going to talk about in the coming weeks, but right now I want to say major fucking props to the guys in Movember partnering with us early doors. Yeah. They do amazing work in the men's mental health space. Come November, we're going to talk about it a bit more, but obviously off the back of Men's Mental Health Month, to have Movember joining us is a fucking huge thing from them for us. So major shout out to the guys at Movember. And if anybody has obviously been affected by issues over the last whatever amount of time, there's a bunch of resources over on their site. So go head over, check out Movember. They're going to be some of our best friends for the year. And maybe 1 or 2 of the little sponsors that we're going to talk about. So yes, long story short, if you haven't joined the waiting list yet, you have 2 fucking weeks to join the waiting list. Then we're cutting it. If you're not on the waiting list by then, it's not happening. You won't be playing Statter this year. Sorry about you. Unless one of your mates who sets up a league adds you into it. But if you want to create your own league next season, you have 2 weeks from today to get on that waiting list and make sure that you're one of the first people to play the future fantasy football. Right. Anyway, on to the actual...
Do not come crying. I'm warning you all now, fellow commissioners and data nerds who don't
Oh,
really
hang on,
understand football.
Jimmy's going into full dad mode here.
I'm warning you. Dad mode is in. The boots are on, right? My dad boots are on. If ye sit there for the next 2 weeks wondering why all this boring tennis and bike riding is on, and don't join the waiting list, I will be very disappointed in each and every one of you. Each and every one of you.
AKA get it fucking done. Right.
Get
anyway.
done.
On with the road. So what we're talking about today, we have some lovely topics. Over in the GVC, we are looking at Nottingham Forest, last season's surprise package, I think it's fair to say, and Jimmy's true love, Brighton. But before that, there has been a couple of teams in the shitter because PSR, because of financial irregularities. And strangely enough, they're not the teams that I suppose we would expect. So Villa and Chelsea have been recently hit with super duper fines by UEFA. Where do we want to start?
I have a question.
It's a mess.
I have a question, right? And once again, it's dipshit guy doesn't know what's going on question territory. But you know the way you said teams we kind of expect, right? Now, I'm no expert in anything, but when I hear Chelsea have been doing something funny with money, and I think about like 20-year-long contracts for £1,000,000 for kids who don't play and end up getting fired for taking drugs, I think team that I expect this from. When I hear Man City, I think team that I expect this from. But Villa seems so nice. Who owns them?
Who doesn't?
So Villa are owned by an American company, or American group, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. But lovely comment in. Sorry, just not to interrupt, but we got lovely. Will Arsenal flop again this season? Yes.
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 It's what they do.
Not if, but when.
It's what they do. Here,
I love the way the general public are able to just unite all of us on this call in one go, because that never happens.
Arsenal will flop again. Yeah.
Anybody who's been a regular watcher of the show knows that I am not a Mikel Arteta fan. Like, I am not having it, not happy about it. I just think he's a bluffer, and obviously all this stuff that's kind of come out over the last week, which we will not talk about, shows Arsenal Football Club in a darker light. So fuck him. Go spend your 80 million on Gyökeres, who is going to be another Darren Núñez, another Jack Martinez, another
Nicholas Bentner.
Well, the list of strikers that have come out of Portugal over the last decade. Portugal is
Portugal. He's a Nicholas Bentner all over him. But anyway,
if you take out his penalty goals, it's 14 goals or 12 goals or something like that. A decent amount of goals. He's going to be another Núñez. He's going to be another Gonçalo Ramos. He's going to be another Jackson Martinez. There's a few of these boys who come out of Portugal for big money. So no, Arsenal are going to flop again. Anyway, I'm on what we were talking about. Aston Villa, and Chelsea. Yeah.
So going back to your question, Jimmy. So Villa are owned. They're jointly owned by an American investment company whose name I can't remember off the top of my head, and then an Egyptian billionaire. So they're kind of combination across America and Egypt. But what's happened with them is UEFA have thrown some hefty fund. Well, actually, are they hefty? You wouldn't call them hefty in the grander scheme of things, to be fair.
I do find it funny. It's like, you have been bad with your finances. Here's a fine for more money.
Yeah, here's a fine for 11 million. It's pocket change to these boys. But anyway, so yeah, 11 million euro for Villa, 31 million for Chelsea, and it's basically that they have breached squad cost rules and the UEFA's equivalent of PSR in the Premier League. The difference here, and John, you'll probably know a little bit more about this than I will, but Premier League allow you to sell tangible assets. Yes. So Chelsea and Villa were very, very bold, and what they did was they sold their two women's teams to their partner companies, sister companies.
Call it what it is. They sold their clubs to themselves.
Basically to themselves, to circumvent Premier League PSR rules. The good guys over at UEFA did some shit right for once and actually said, we're not going to allow tangible assets like that to be sold, so you're fucked anyway. But this basically means they have 30 million for Chelsea, 11 million for Villa. There's a conditional fine that if they breach again over the next 3 years, it's like triple for Chelsea and double for Villa. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it's fairly significant. And the other piece, which will be interesting for these clubs in European competition, They can't register. So they have to. So the value of players being sold has to equal the value of players being bought in for players that they're registering for European competition. Easiest way I can explain that. So if Villa have 50 million, if they're buying in 50 million worth of players to register for UEFA competitions, they have to sell 50 million worth of players to balance that out.
For UEFA, not for Premier League, but for UEFA.
Just for UEFA. That's just for European competitions, not
They're
for
both
Premier League.
Champions League? No, Chelsea are Champions League and Villa are Europa, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. So any European competitions, so Champions League, Europa League, Conference League. If they are competing in that and they're buying a player and registering them to play in that competition, they have to balance the books by selling an existing squad player to the same value.
So I guess then,
combination, obviously,
I guess if I'm allowed to follow up, the tangible relevance, who have Chelsea and Villa bought that's likely to play in Europe? Apart from Pedro, obviously.
Chelsea, so it's a bit, basically they got the deals.
Well, this is going back to like, they sold the women's team before last season, like last summer. So this is probably going back as far as
for Villa
and transfer window, like January and last year's transfer window.
So the difference here is in the Premier League, they're fine. They've essentially Aston Villa. So there is an article on StatrCast.com on PSR and the teams flying close to the win. I didn't have Chelsea in as one of the teams flying close to the win. That they were in the second tier, let's say, the ones that if they made any mistakes now they'd be in major shit. The difference between Europe and Premier League is that the European competition won't allow the sale of assets to essentially sister fucking businesses. It's the same idea of what City were shenanigans around with sponsorships. Like, oh, here's a PO box in the middle of France. They're sponsoring us 30 million. Oh, would you look at that? We sold our women's club to the Chelsea PO box in Belgium. Would you believe? Go away. Like, it's just fucking nonsense. So it doesn't affect them in the Premier League. Villa are in the shit in the PSR for the Premier League as well, because look how much money they've spent over the last 2 years. That's why they needed to sell the likes of Jean Duran. They've already basically put their outlet. Part of the reason for the Rashford deal not going through this summer is Villa needed to sell to buy, essentially, in terms of PSR, or they had to wait until now for the new accounting window, but still then being potentially in breach next season. So it gets really complicated when you talk about PSR, because you've essentially got 3 different levels. To this, you've got the teams in Europe, you've got you've got the European regulations, you've got the Premier League regulations, but you've also got the wider Football Association regulations, which a team like Leicester, who went down, are already in breach of the EFL rules from when they came up. So you've essentially got a whole jiggery-pokery of accountancy, which is why teams over the last 2 years are getting more and more creative with how they basically push money around. This is part of the reason why Chelsea had their 10-year deals, because under the terms of amortization, the cost of the transfer was deducted over a 10-year period. So someone like, I don't know,
Mudryk.
A good example.
As an example, they bought him for 100 million. He's 3 years into his contract, so the theory there is that he's only worth 70 million is what they owe out on him now, theoretically, let's say, just for the purpose of maths. So if they needed to sell him for the purpose of accountancy, it needed to be 70 million or more to register as a profit on the accounts. Anything under that would be registered as a net loss. So it means that the course of the contract and the transfer fee gets deducted over the period of time. So Chelsea are now committed to spending 100 million a season for the next 8 years because of the players they bought over the last years. They know and have that budgeted and put aside that is guaranteed outlay they have each year for the next 8 years in terms of how the contract situation works. It's the same reason why if United sell Casemiro now for anything over 20 million, he will be registered as a profit on the accountancy books. It's like the depreciation of a car.
Yeah.
Right. Except that sometimes players get better with time, don't they?
They do, which is why the Chelsea Moneyball system, the Brighton Moneyball system, the Brentford Moneyball system means if I can turn a 4 million in Buemo to a 60 million sale, that's going to show us 55 million plus on the accountancy check for this year. And Buemo's probably a bad example because they would have paid 4 million up front and just got it done. So he'd be classified. It's the same reason like when a club sells an academy player, there was no cost. So anything they sell him for in the eyes of the accountancy will say it's clean profit. So United selling McTominay last year for 25 million meant that they could actually go and spend 25 million up front and allowing them to spend 100 million over the course of 4 seasons as an example, but they had the 25 million upfront capital to put down for this year without it touching the sides of their PSR regulations as such. It's a whole fuckery, jiggery, pokery.
It's more aligned to NFL than we think, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the fact that 4 years ago I didn't think I'd need to know I need a fucking degree in law and accountancy to follow player transfers. But no, here we are. I reckon like JP Morgan, you need a new employee because I can do this because I've now spent too much time looking at PSR regulations for fucking Premier League. Honestly, every 20 club in the league I have on that article where they're at, what they're above, what they're down, where they're sitting. You'd be surprised with some of the teams that are sitting there. So I'll just give the whistle stop tour. The clubs under pressure are obviously Villa. So they're on a knife edge. You've got Everton with a loss limit of 39 million. So they're, again, Everton still recovering the problems from the last few years. Leeds United are in the shit. Burnley are massively in the shit because they turned
Leeds will get winning stuff from the Championship, won't they? They'll have them out.
No, it's the thing is, Leicester, when they came up last year, were actually already in breach. Because their final year in the Prem, they had the breach, but they couldn't be charged on it while they were in the EFL. Yeah. But they had an existing case with the EFL that they're now going to be charged for now that they're back down. So it's why you're seeing teams like Sunderland selling a Joe Bellingham because it financially bumps the account so that they're not going to be in breach. It's the same reason why Leicester last year sold Keenan Dewsbury Hall to Chelsea. He was their best player. They fucking needed him if they had any chance of staying in the league. But in order to not start the season with a 10-point fine plus, they needed to sell him to balance the books. So like Nottingham Forest are the last team. We're going to talk about Nottingham Forest in a bit, but they're on the edge. So this is why players' sales right now are paramount for Forest and why they haven't purchased. The clubs who are close to the wall but are okay are United, Chelsea, Spurs, Liverpool, West Ham, Fulham, and the teams that can basically do whatever the fuck they want are Brighton, Brentford, Palace, Bournemouth, Sunderland, and Arsenal, and of course the team with their 115 plus charges, Man City. So they're obviously the guys that can kind of do what they want. So every club's PSR situation, I fucking hate this PSR thing because it's almost like, how can we find ways of hiding money down the back of the couch to deal with the problem later? It just seems like a can-kicking fucking... In theory, great idea because it stopped clubs like Newcastle coming in and going, do you know what we're going to do? 300 million for Neymar, please, thanks. Because they're backed by Saudi oil funds and this, that, and the other. It's stopping Gulf nations warping the transfer market for all clubs. So in theory, brilliant. In practice, not so good because a team like Newcastle who wants to develop and progress have to sell to buy, so they can't actually speed up their momentum. So the historical teams with bigger incomes in the first place from advertising, marketing, sponsorship agreements already have a 10-year head start on anybody who wants to enter the party now. So it's a fucking shit show. Doll, your head's hurt yet?
the level of confusion.
You're telling me there's a whole other numbers game in football?
Yes, money.
Yeah.
Can I play with it?
And next year we're bringing PSR rules into StatrCast.
We had to do it before. We had to do it before.
We actually figure out what PSR rules actually fucking are. We probably could, but it's not
Jeez, it sounds like an absolute dog's mess, to be honest with you.
It's a complete shit show.
Still no ruling for City. City still haven't got their...
Oh, no. So, like, if it was Everton, they'd have been banned last year. If it was Leicester, they've already been dealt with. But let's ignore, because they're good. And they've got really good lawyers, and they can just keep clogging it up. And they're suing the Premier League for rules that they've changed since in relation to it. They've won one of the cases that they're trying to then use as a reference point to go backwards on and go, well, if it's not illegal now, it shouldn't have been illegal then, so go fuck yourself. And that's like 40 of them, aka the selling of assets to oneself for profit. And
some lawyers are making lots of money here.
Some lawyers are making like $2,000 an hour in retainers plus, and that's probably being generous.
That's being incredibly generous. I
don't know the price of accountants. I don't know the price of lawyers. I'm a
football guy. It's more money than we make, lads, that's for sure.
I'm the guy that goes down on a football pitch with a bag of cones and a bag of balls and a whistle to shout at grown-ass men and kids. Like, that's what I do. I've got my little coaching badges, and that's the part of football I like. This boardroom fucking jiggery, pokery, financial madness is more of a byproduct of loving football and having to learn.
But by the looks of it, this is right up Jimmy Street.
It's right.
Well, kind of. It is and it's not. Like, I'm not like, I'm new to the culture. I'm not exactly like, my heart is not a football. Do you know what I mean? I'm not as emotionally invested as you guys in the actual beautiful game. But it does occur to me that very few things are made better by people coming up with convoluted financial systems to obscure what they're doing and maximize their profits. This all sounds very familiar from some stuff we've had some problems with as a society in the past. And, it's ringing a couple of bells for me that kind of say, this isn't the fun stuff. So no, I don't want to play with these games. I don't want to play with these games at all. I want to talk about fucking fantasy football. That's what I want to talk about.
So is it time? It's time.
It's time.
It's time to dim the lights, to strap in, to strap on. We're going to the GBC. I'm telling you, I'm going to get more creative with these as we go. Yeah.
I like 1,000 voices on the internet screaming, please don't let him get any more creative. But yeah, it's Gary's Voyeur Corner. What have you been, who have you been staring at this week, Gary?
Who have been looking at this week, lads? We're looking at Brighton, your beloved Brighton this week.
Brighton and Forest.
Yeah, we finally get to your team. And Forest, as we said, the surprise package of last year. So we kind of, as per usual, we look at who you look at, top picks, who you want to avoid, and who potentially could be a wildcard option. And yeah, I think we'll start with Forest and we'll end with Brighton. We'll end on
because I think Forest are a fascinating situation, and God fucking knows what Brighton are going to do year on year. Like, it's just we found some Ecuadorian child who is now a right wing. Okay.
Well, their new player, if I can pronounce his name properly, is good enough. The name is good enough just to be drafted on his own. But anyway, we'll get back to that in a second. Let's look at Forest first. So, your top pick for me this year, if you're looking at anybody for Forest, it's Morgan Gibbs-White. Quite an obvious choice.
No,
John doesn't agree.
I absolutely do not agree.
John does not agree.
Elliot Anderson.
Well, let's not just skip past it. Why do you not agree? Who's your choice?
Anderson, he came in, and as the season progressed, he kept getting better and better. If you saw him in the under-21s Euros player of the tournament alongside Harvey Elliott, he's genuinely a proper footballer. Morgan Gibbs-White last season at the start of the year, A1, I would have agreed with you for the first 6 months of the season, but as the season progressed and Anderson came more to the fore, you had a Lang off one side, Wood off through the middle, and I can't remember who was off the other side, but Morgan Gibbs-White started to drop further back and became more of an 8 than he was a 10/winger. And I think that will mean that a player like him, his output is going to drop, whereas a player like Anderson who's coming, you've essentially got this, right?
Yeah.
In my mind, Gibbs-White started the season here, Anderson started the season here, and that scale is starting to
I went the other way. Yeah, I get it. No, I get where you're coming from, but I mean, Gibbs-White's averages, even when he did start playing in a deeper role, the average points per game didn't drop off too much. So he averaged 12 per game. I think the last 10 to 12 matches, it was like just below the 10 mark. So there was a dip, but I still think if I'm picking anyone from Forest, it's him. He is solid all around. If you look at all of his numbers, there's nothing really there where you kind of go, "Ooh, he could actually improve on that." He is one of those. He is one of those players who can. Now, I'm not taking away from Anderson. You absolutely look at him. But for me, it's Gibbs-White. An argument could be made for Anderson as well, but that's my top pick. I actually thought the person who you avoid this year was going to be the one that we would all, shout and scream at the screen and disagree with me. Who do we think?
Chris Wood.
It is Chris Wood.
It's absolutely
Chris Wood. It's absolutely.
There's no way he does that again.
There's no way.
No. If we talk, yeah, absolutely. And if we want to talk about dramatic drop off halfway through the season, let's look at Chris Wood. He averaged 5.5 points per game over the past 10 games. Across the whole season, he averaged just below 10. That's half of the output in the last 10 games of last season. That's indicative of where Wood will probably be from the start of next year. You look at his numbers overall.
Just to interrupt you there. The problem there is if you play the game over in the other echelon of the world, Chris Wood will still be an asset because there's no forwards in the game unless you're going to pick. It's Jimenez, Wood, Cunha, and
It's not Jimenez, it's Isaac.
And Isaac, but that's about it. You've got 5 options, so Chris Wood is still going to be in the vertical there,
and probably and in that point scoring system, he'll probably do quite well.
He'll
probably still
a sum total of fuck all is still going to be fuck all.
Yeah. But you look, you avoid him like the plague. He finished in the top 10 last year. That's because he had an unbelievable first 6 months. Do not fall for the hype. Avoid him like the plague. Absolutely keep away from him. The wild card is... This was a toss-up, actually, to be fair, between 2 players. One of them being Milinkovic, who finished 10th overall last season.
Okay.
Really, really solid defender. Averaged 11 points per game last season. His defensive stats were just off the complete chart. But I'm actually going for somebody else as my wild card this year. And it's more because of my love for fullbacks. And it's Nico Williams.
That's because he used to play for Liverpool.
He used to play for Liverpool.
Yes.
No, but
my scouts are
he never.
Milenkovic has all the points, all the scores. He's nailed on.
But he's
top 3 for the season. He can't be beaten. He's unstoppable. He attacks. He does everything. His stats are brilliant. He's reliable. There's no rotation risk. The team looks exactly the same. There's no transfers. But Nico used to play for Liverpool. Come on, guys.
He's too obvious. He's too obvious a choice.
I disagree with all of your choices for Nottingham Forest. Look, they were the sleeper cell last year. They were the underdog of the season. The amount of drop-off of their players for next season. If it was me, first choice is Elliot Anderson all day long. Want to avoid, sure, Chris Wood. I do agree with that. Where's Matt Sells in this conversation? Where's Anthony Alanga in this conversation?
I want to talk Alanga for a minute. Because I have been saying for years that young fella's waiting to pop off once he finds the right team, and I think he's just about to find the right team. The only thing with Alanga is his points per game have never really picked up. Now, I'm going to say your nailed-on pick for Forest is Milenkovic all year long. That man is top 5 in his category, and everything screams Milenkovic because there's a risk to all the rest. Yes, I get the Gibbs-White, Anderson going over, going under thing. But frankly, we don't know how Nottingham Forest are going to do overall this year. They are the most unpredictable. I know you talk about nobody knows what Brighton are going to do. Nobody has a fucking clue what Forest are going to do this year. I would say the one to avoid...
They've also got European football next year in the conference, so there's that to come in.
This is it. You know what I mean? They're going to be more stretched. I think Aina is one to avoid. He showed great promise at the start of the season, and an awful lot of the August, September FPL drop-off players would be going back going, oh, Aina, I remember he was good for me last year. No, he's going to be used up on Europe. I don't think Chris Wood does this again. I didn't think he did it last time. He's the streakiest player of all. I do think there's a lot of value still in Gibbs-White, even as a DM, but just simply because the points per game are high. But I would say for me, it's Milenkovic all day long. If he does 3/4 of what he did last year, he's still a top 20 defender. Like his points are ridiculous. 11.25 per game. It's absolutely nuts. He's tipping Tarkovsky like. So for me, that's a really easy choice. We love a centre back because you know that you're not going to lose them through the season.
Best keeper in the league last year, or one of the top 3 keepers in the league last year, and we haven't even talked about him.
Yes,
he's going to be busy regardless. He's good.
But an awful lot of his points last year came off the back of 13 clean sheets, and we just don't know if Forest have it in them again this year. We just don't know if they're not going to catch everyone by surprise again this year. We don't know what I don't know. They seem to be very quiet in terms of transfers in. I don't think they're a money club, and they have the Euro problem.
Not many transfers out either, have they?
No, it's all quiet over there.
They need.
But the reason it's quiet actually is and the news broke of this today. They've been working to get Edu, formerly of Arsenal, as their new. Yeah, and he was only confirmed today as their new head of global. What is that? Global head of football.
This is one of these ones, Gary, right, where he left Arsenal last year, but he had to do his garden leave time, so this was the earliest available point for him to start.
Yeah, but you'll probably find now that there'll be a bit of activity around Forest now. Players going out, players coming in. I know there was some noise around Alanga going to Newcastle. I think it was 45 million.
55 bid
rejected. You'll find that deal might get done. That deal might get done for probably north of 60 million.
I imagine Barnes or Gordon has to leave Newcastle to accommodate that.
Well, Anthony Gordon is on Arsenal's radar, but then the Noni Madueke news from Chelsea to Arsenal has actually put that in. Where did we
What
ever
the
see
fuck is
that
that?
coming from?
If you had asked us to pick 40 possible strikers to fix the Arsenal problem, he would have been the 50th guess.
Yeah.
And again, once again, for whoever asked earlier on, Arsenal will bottle it. Stuff like this is why they keep buying shit players. Gordon at Arsenal could work because I don't think there's much left in what you call him, Kendall. He used to play for Brighton.
Martinelli?
No, the other fella.
Trossard?
Plastic looking. Yeah, Trossard. There's not much left in him. He got found out. He's not a 90 minutes Premier League player, so a good left winger like Anthony Gordon could work there. But Noni Madueke is the answer to a question nobody asked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
but I think that's why domino effect going back. That's probably why we haven't seen much. The reason we haven't seen much out of Forest so far is because they were working to bring in Edu. And John, you're probably right. When he left Arsenal, there was I'm sure there was some sort of period where he couldn't return to a Premier League club.
And that's
but that's going to be.
He would have had to do his time, but his job isn't over Forest; it's over all of.
It is over everything, but ultimately, I would imagine,
etc.
Yeah, but I would imagine he'll have a say because Forest will be the biggest part of that.
They will.
And they're probably holding fire on a couple of deals just until he gives them the once over and the thumbs up.
I do want Dean's opinion though, because Dean and Morgan Gibbs-White and Callum Hudson-Odoi being the other guy. Morgan Gibbs-White and Callum Hudson-Odoi are Dean's errors.
Girls that got away.
I dropped Morgan Gibbs-White last year after about 4 weeks when he got injured.
Red card.
And then, was it a red card?
Red card. 1 week ban, you dropped him.
Okay, well, I dropped the Nottingham Forest player who we pegged to be getting relegated after 4 weeks. So I don't think it was a bad decision to be made. At the time, it's very easy to look back and say, obviously, it was a stupid decision. But
because it was.
It's not like I dropped Erling Haaland after getting a red card here. Like, you know what I mean? Come on. But anyway, Jimmy managed to pick him up and got to the final and get second again. So that could have been. I
think that was the second worst transfer of the year, outside of my Brendan Johnson, Frenzo Fernandez.
I mean, it obviously wasn't the second worst transfer of the year. Again, at the time, Nottingham Forest it's very easy to look back in hindsight, but at the time, we were saying we all said last year that they were going to get relegated. You know, so
who did you drop him for? Actually, I can't remember.
Quick stat check. Morgan Gibbs-White finished last season on 416 points. Erling Haaland finished 18 points ahead of him. So yes, you did drop Erling Haaland for getting a red card in a one-match ban.
Yeah, but who did it?
I was so happy when you did it. I was so happy. It was such a stressful time in my life, but you fixed it. No. Come here, look, you're right. Like Gibbs-White had shown that he was a solid player the season before. He wasn't stellar. He was a 10.8 point, 2 games 8, 1 game 10 point kind of player. So to drop him out of rage on a red card absolutely made sense, because I think there was an early part of the season where he was in that DM role. He moved into the attacking role. The points just kind of gradually went upwards and upwards and upwards. Forest went upwards and upwards and upwards. And as Gary said earlier on, it tailed off towards the end of the season. And John, you're absolutely right. As he was moving into more defensive role, his value did drop. But I had a hell of a time with him along the way.
And yet, you'll still take Milinkovic above him next season.
I will, and I'll tell you why. What Milinkovic does is going to be happening at Forest either way. There may be no goals next season. There may be no wins. There may be no 7-0 victories over Brighton. But there will still be a big man at the back keeping the ball out of the hole. So, and yet, look, I see the logic of Sells as well. I do. I just wonder, with an increased level of goals going in and a decreased number of clean sheets, that's going to hit a goalie harder than a centre half in terms of how we score things. So just be a little bit cautious of that. And if all else fails, sure, there's always Ryan Yates.
Stop it. Stop it. Just no. Come here. Right. So, in summary, Gary, you're wrong. We all disagree with you.
This is the beauty of Statter.
Everyone's wrong.
Everyone is wrong, and you will all realize that I'm right by the end of the season.
So give me the breakdown. So who was the key? Who was the
Gibbs-White was your banker. Chris Wood you avoid, which I think we're all in agreement with. And then for me, again, Milinkovic and Nico Williams. It was a toss-up between the two. I went for Williams because he's the lesser known of the two. He's the one that could potentially fly under the radar. He's strong in the defence. He suits the attacking style of play from Nuno as a fullback. But you could argue Milinkovic because he's an unsexy player, and you wouldn't necessarily pick him. You could argue that he'd be a wild card there as well. So again, Forest being one of those teams where you've got a couple of different options. But come draft, we'll see where we end up. But moving on to Brighton, and you can just see Jimmy's eyes light up like Christmas. Yeah,
the masters of the transfer.
He's so happy.
There's going to be
time of the year when there's no actual football to be played. This is when they do their magic.
There's going to be some really uncomfortable home truths addressed with Brighton when we look at the numbers here, lads. But Gary, before I do that, go on.
Yeah.
No.
To be fair, when I was looking through the numbers, there's a couple of players that are, hover between the 8 and 9. Obviously, João Pedro has moved to Chelsea, which will be a big loss for them. But they have signed Charalampos Costulas, which is a great name.
Let's talk about him. 30 million.
We'll talk about.
He's not coming to no bench at 30 million.
No, he's not. What was it? 27 million pound, 27.5 million sterling, which is about 34 million euro. He's coming in, so he is. So let's start with who you avoid, because we might as well. We're talking about Charalampos Costulas, who will always get his full name. And because he's coming in, as rightly, John, you've said he is not coming in to sit on no bench. You stay away from players like Jorginho Rutter.
Yeah.
For me, I picked up Rutter after 6 games last season when he was fire. He was absolute fire for about 6 games towards the start. He ended up scoring 5 goals for the whole season. 4 of them came before Christmas. He was just, in that purple patch, he was unplayable. And then he fell off the edge of the cliff to the point where he lost his starting place to Danny fucking Welbeck.
How dare you speak his name in vain?
He played for Arsenal, John.
He scored 12 this season, Gary. He scored 12.
He did.
No, look, John.
I know.
Gary's having
I'm having a mare today. Yeah. Look, you stay away from Rutter, and it's because Costulas is coming in. Charalampos Costulas is coming in for 34 million. He will probably end up eating into some of Rutter's time. And I'd say after Christmas, he did nothing. He lost his starting place. Leave him alone. Your top pick is Mitoma.
Yep.
It's obvious. There's no reason to go into the great detail. He was joint top scorer alongside Pedro and Welbeck.
Sorry, we can't mention Mitoma without mentioning that he has a degree in dribbling. Like, I think that's just something that has to be mentioned every time you mention Kairo Mitoma, that he has an actual fucking degree in how to run with a football.
It's like the thing is stuck.
It shows. It shows. He's an absolute baller.
It should, but also that goal he scored last year with that touch, that goal, goal. That should have been the goal of the season. The one that actually got it. No, I'm not having it.
If I start talking about Kaoru Mitoma, I'm going to sound like Roy Keane talking about
anything.
The man from Cork. What you call him? Dennis Irwin.
Oh yes.
I don't want to go there, but Mitoma is an absolute god. But even in the numbers, he's by far and away the best non-João Pedro player Brighton had last year. I would love to disagree with you on Rutter, but I think Brighton are going to be very rotatey at the front this year. Danny Welbeck still has legs. He's just off the back of one of his best seasons, so you're not going to write him off. Rutter is not João Pedro. Costulas shows promise, but he is not João Pedro. So I think those 3 are going to rotate in 2 slots for most of the year, which actually endangers all 3 as fantasy assets. I think they're strong on the bench, but maybe not in your starting lineup.
See, Brighton are doing what they do, and they're doing a lot of business at the moment. So you've got Costulas has come in for 35 million euro, so 27 million pound. You've got Maxime de Kuiper, I can't pronounce the name properly, but he's a fullback that's after coming from Club Brugge for 20 million. He's coming in to go straight in at left back over there. They're starting to revamp their back line over there, Brighton. They brought also your man in Diogo Coppola, the Hellas Verona Italian centre back. So they're starting. So like these fellas that they brought in, Costulas is 18, Kuiper is 24. Coppola is 21, so they're starting to look at how to age down. Also, the real interesting one is the free transfer from PSV Oliver Buscagali, 27 years of age, coming in from PSV Eindhoven. So the problem with a team like Brighton is they have such a high turnover of fucking players because they're a selling club. That's what they do.
Yeah.
That when you're trying to pinpoint, like Kyra Matoma is the obvious, because if he stays there, he's obvious. But if he moves on, there's a genuine struggle with Brighton as to who is their nailed on, who is their wild card. Because all the wild card picks that we're going to look at from Brighton, you'd be saying, ooh, ifs and muts and babies and nuts and this kind of vibe, because I love Matt Riley. I think he's a baller.
I've got 3 wild cards for you straight off the bat, and you just touched on one of them. But one of them, I think, don't sleep on Diego Coppola. That is a young man who somehow has 81 Serie A games already at the age of 21.
Yep.
And the squad he's coming into, and I love Lewis Dunk, but I think we all see that all good things come to an end, and the time of Big Lewis at the back is tapering away. John-Paul Van Hecke was a monster last year. He needs someone beside him. I think that's going to be Coppola increasingly as the season goes on.
I think it's going to initially be your man Buscagali, 27, PSV, Eredivisie, centre back. He'll probably be
starting out, but watch Coppola. I'm telling you, he'll be not quite nailed on, but as close as you get. The rotation's insane, though. I want to call out 2 others as potential. Hang on, Gary, who's your wild card? Let's get Gary being wrong out of the way first.
Actually, to be fair, the logic behind this is very similar to what we're talking about, and this is the rotation piece. And I'm looking at left back. My wild card is this lad from Club Brugge, Maxime de Coupé, who they brought in for 20 million. I don't know whether he starts or not straight away, and it's just because he's coming from the Belgian league in, and Estepinen has been relatively solid in there for the last couple of years. So for me, he's a sleeper. You keep an eye, you see who plays between the 2 of them. They're going to fight it out for the left back spot. So you keep an eye on that. You don't draft either of those 2 players, and you
not early anyway. No.
You don't. No, I actually don't think. I don't think you draft either of them. No.
Brighton are so dangerous to draft. It's like
they are. There's a reason. There's a mathematical reason for it. And I was going there early, but let's get this out of the way. This is going to hurt me to say it. As a team of fantasy football assets, Brighton are not a very good club.
Brighton are very similar in their mid-pack players.
Yeah, it's the exact same problem. You have a certain... it's like almost the opposite of who was it we were looking at? Was it Brentford we were looking at? There was 5 or 6 absolute ballers and everyone else was toss.
Yeah.
The problem with Brighton is the high to low, the delta isn't very high. You've got an awful lot of good players. Nobody standing out is great. Even Pedro didn't break 10 per week last year. And remember, Forest centre-back was on 11 a week. Pedro didn't break 10. I'm going to come back for 2 crazy wildcards in a minute, but if you go down through the numbers, the per game is almost all between 6.5 and 9. That's not enough to win a league, lads. It's enough to win a few games. It's enough to stack a bench. It might be enough to give you the edge if you get some consistent players, but you also have the rotation risk everywhere, despite being a club that traditionally isn't seen as having much depth. Like, you've got all of the Pep Guardiola spinning around bullshit that City have, but the guys on the bench didn't cost 120 million quid. You know what I mean? It's this huge, constantly swarming squad. So it's a nightmare trying to pick assets. Plus, the nail-on guys, even Mitoma, are slowing down in terms of performance. The club is doing well. It's obviously unsexy, pragmatic football that's gradually moving them up through the table. It's a level. And that makes it very, very hard to analyse. So, in the spirit of wildcards, I'm going to throw 2 wildcards at you for 2 young midfielders who have shown flashes of brilliance. One of whom is returning after a rather successful loan spell at, of all places, Leicester. Facundo Buonanotte, despite where he was playing, managed to pick up 5 goals in the Premier League last year. There were some games there where he was 13 to 14 points in the week. He gets stuck the fuck in. Now, I know it's easy to shine at a Leicester, but it's also very hard to achieve at a Leicester. He's come back now with 30-odd games under his belt last season. If he starts to become a regular, he could start to be a real force in midfield, attacking. At the other end, at the knock-them-down end, you knew I was going to do this, didn't you? It's Jack Hinchelwood. It's Jack Hinchelwood and how he has come into his own in the very late part of the season where there was really nothing left to play for. He should put in some absolutely sterling performances. Again, the numbers aren't stellar. He's 7.5 a week, which, puts him at the high end of Brighton when you average it out. but that's off 26 games played. I think as he becomes a regular, this guy will mature into a really good player, and he could become one of those DMs that club is so bloody famous for producing. Hopefully. So if you're going truly wild card, because this is a team made of we don't know what the fuck they're going to do players, those two keep an eye on.
For me, the nail on pick is Matoma. Your wild card for me is between Verbruggen and Van Hecke, and the one to avoid is Danny Welbeck. He's going to age out at some stage. He is 34. He's at the tail end of his career. He had an awful period with injuries. Love him as a footballer. Danny Welbeck, that would be the end is nigh. That's why they've literally tried for the last 4 or 5 years. I'm not even bringing Evan Ferguson into the conversation because he's about to be fucking sold to wherever will take him.
Roma, I think I saw.
I've seen a bunch of players. They're literally looking
really cool. That'd be a good move for him. Roma.
He's been linked with everybody and his mother at this stage.
Yeah.
So I think it's, for me, they want to avoid, but you could say Reuter, you could say, I'm leaning on Welbeck because I think his output has been decent the last few years, but he's going to start aging out, and as he starts to get older, that pressing system that Brighton play, he's going to get less and less adapt to. So I think your man Kuslas is going to start playing more minutes alongside Reuter, and Welbeck is going to become more of the supporting act type player. You're going to have players like maybe Matt O'Reilly, if he's still there. There's talk that he might be sold. He could step up, or not, could step up, or Brighton, basically, long story short, if anybody comes in with a decent chunk of change, anybody's fair game. Like, that's just how it is. So I think with Brighton, you have to wait until close to the season. To
see when it settles down. See how it plays out.
Watch
See if it's a 7th place season or a 17th place season, because we genuinely do not know.
They're the kind of team where you need to watch their last 2 preseason games to see what partnerships and pairings are coming out. Because if you see Van Hecke starting, and then it's a case of, right, who's the fella that's leaning in beside him because they're going to try to get that match minutes, like 4 or 5 of their base players. So if that's the team that goes out in the last 2 games of the preseason, 4 or 5 of those base players in the starting, then you can go, all right, the lads that are floating in around that looks to be thereabouts. There's a few teams that are in that pocket, but I think Brighton are the ones for that.
And yet somehow they'll get Champions League next year, Wednesday.
They won't. Fulham are going to finish above Brighton. Fulham are going to finish above Brighton. That's my third bet.
Nobody likes Fulham.
Fulham are going to finish. This is another Gary. I've got 2 bets with Gary.
I am not taking that one. No,
Jimmy, I'm going to take this bet with you.
Brighton finish above Fulham again this year.
20 quid?
Yep.
We're going to go try.
No, you're unemployed. You can't afford all these bets.
Gambling is all he has left. Dean. Don't take it away from him. I want his money. I want the last.
I'm going to win the 2 against Gary because he thinks Everton are going to finish above United, which is ridiculous. And what was the other one we said 2 weeks ago?
I actually can't remember.
Bets down because you
we did that. I have no idea. I can't remember.
If I'm going spending this kind of cash money dollars,
I'm sure it's in the WhatsApp. I'm sure it's in the WhatsApp.
We'll check.
We'll dig it. We'll dig it out for next week. We'll dig it out.
Really Brighton are going to finish below Fulham. So Gary, I've got a question from you from the Tiki Talkie.
Yes,
it's about Pats.
Okay.
So I'll just answer this audience question and then we'll bounce out the turns. They're asking, are Pats in line to be looking at anybody? This is our little League of Ireland corner.
So the transfer window has opened up. They are looking at somebody from Rovers, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Other than that, it's been quiet. It's actually been outgoing. So Bulger's left and has gone to Galway. Mason Mealy will move on in the coming weeks. He's the 1 million player signing for Spurs, and best of luck to him. Yeah. There's rumours of Anto Breslin, who plays left back, going back to Bohemians, who hasn't had a great season. So no real news of incomings from Pats so far. More case of players being moved on than anything else.
Cool. There's your League of Ireland update to Jack, the Pats fan, who is literally...
You're very welcome, Jack. Any questions like that, though, feel free to put them through on the social channels and we will answer them.
Absolutely. We love answering audience questions. So if any questions do come in, preferably related to how the hell you're going to draft. And remember, because I think we're done for today, remember, you have 2 weeks left to get on the waiting list. The season starts in a month. 2 weeks to get on the waiting list.
Don't disappoint Jimmy.
I will dad you fuckers so hard if you don't do what you're told.
Yes, Daddy.
No, John, no. The GBC is finished.
So
Close the robes.
close the robe, open the blind, we're done.
We're done.
Right, so on that note, look, there is an article on that PSR situation and where clubs land. That's over on the website, StatrCast.com. It's the same place where you can obviously find out all of the team's fixtures for the start of the season. We've got some sleeper cell articles. We've got there's some really shit hot content. Like, I know I'm biased, but we've got some really shit hot content that isn't the same rinse and repeat drivel that we're going to find on some websites that we're not going to name Daily Mail. but like, yeah, it's going to be some good. There's some actual good stuff there. Join the waiting list. There's a couple more weeks to do it. It's getting really, really close here. Anybody who's watching, anybody who's been following throughout the year knows the amount of like sheer effort that the whole team has been putting in behind the scenes to get this app ready, rumbling, rolling. So if you're excited as us to play a completely new version of fantasy football, StatrDraft.com, StatrDraft. We're across all the socials. We're on the website. Do it now before it's too late. On that note, I think that's all from me tonight, boys. Pleasure to have you as always.
Pleasure as always, gentlemen.
Bitches.
We're coming in hot. Talk to you in a while, bro.